The Floor Academy podcast is sponsored by Trelama, the trade labor marketplace, where businesses can find skilled trade labor, such as flooring installers, and where flooring installers and other skilled tradespeople can find permanent or project work. You can set up your profile at trelama.com, TRALAMA.com, or download the app from the Apple App Store or Google Play. And remember, Trelama is always free for skilled tradespeople. In-floor heating has never been easier. The new 2020 NWFA guidelines provide electric in-floor heating options that do not require the system to be embedded in cement. The Warm Step system allows for safe installation for glue-down, floating, and nailed-down installation directly over an in-floor heating system. What does that mean for the wood flooring dealer or installer? It means you can now offer your customers a simpler, faster, more cost-effective option for safely installing electric in-floor radiant heat systems with a wood floor. ThermoSoft's Warm Step is tested and approved by many flooring adhesive and fastener manufacturers. Visit warmstep.com now to learn how you can heat up your business with the best in-floor heating system for wood floors. Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hedin, owner of Illustrious Hardwoods in sunny Phoenix, Arizona. We're here to talk with flooring professionals from all across the country about the issues that matter to you. I want to encourage you to learn while you earn. This week's guest is not a flooring professional, but his name is Ansel Hall. Ansel is a business broker with Sunbelt Business Brokers in Phoenix. After a career in finance handling multi-million-dollar mergers and acquisitions, he hung it up to start his own business. After selling, Ansel bought into a car dealership and helped make it successful as well. Wanting to return to his roots but help small to medium-sized business owners, he found his job at Sunbelt. Listen in as we discuss why it is so important to begin with the end in mind. Ansel Hall, are you on the line?
I'm here, yes.
Awesome. Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's all mine. This is a fun one because you aren't a flooring guy, which is A-okay, but you have definitely plenty of information to give us, and I won't give it away yet. So let's have you introduce yourself and tell us, who you are, what you do, how you got to doing that, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it.
Sounds good. Well, as you said, my name is Ansel. That's A-N-S-E-L, Hall. And I'm a business broker with Sunbelt Business Brokers in the Phoenix area. And my background is originally started in the investment banking area. I've got about 25 years of experience as an investment banker working with Wall Street firms, doing a lot of merger and acquisition advisory work, and as well as raising capital for emerging growth companies. Worked on a number of private placements and IPOs and debt offerings, and as I mentioned, a lot of merger and acquisition advisory work as well. And then I left that and went off and tried my entrepreneurial wings for a couple of companies. Did a complete startup and then actually ended up buying and ultimately selling a company as well. So sold both those two. Those were both in the consumer space. One was a consumer product company and the other one was in the auto industry. And left that recent one earlier this year, actually, and decided to get back to my merger and acquisition advisory roots and wanted to do it on a local basis here in the Phoenix area. So looked around for some of the better business brokers and ended up deciding to join up with the Sunbelt team. Sunbelt is a national franchisor of business brokerage offices, and the team here has been in place for a while. They've got a lot of expertise, very good team. And we're out there looking to help small businesses and lower middle market companies find liquidity through the sale of their business.
Which I think that's exactly why I reached out and I went looking for a business broker, right? Because we're going to put time and effort into a business. and we're going to grow something, whether it's just our name or, we call it, Pete's Flooring, or it's Flooring Extreme, whatever we want to do. You build this brand and it exists. And then you get too old to do it. You can't be on your knees anymore. And a lot of guys, they close up shop, they sell their tools, they sell their van or their trailer, whatever they got, and that's it. I got to think after 40 years of doing something, it's got to be worth more than that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's that's a situation that we hear about frequently, and I'm with you. I advise the owners of businesses to start thinking about creating value in what they're doing. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day operations, but they're investing a tremendous amount of time and money and effort into their company, and they really should be thinking about, well, what's the long-term end game here? Because every single owner of a business, if you think about it, will eventually leave the business. They'll transition out of it somehow. Mm-hmm. And if you know that from the beginning, you might as well start thinking about, well, what can I do to create something of value that can last beyond my transitioning out of the company.
Okay. So you start with the end in mind. Okay. So walk us backwards through this process, right? Like if I'm going to lose, I don't want to say lose. That's a bad word, I guess. If I'm going to sell my brand one day, what are my steps to get there? Like, but I would think you have to walk backwards through it to figure out the steps in order.
Yeah, well, we could do that, but let me suggest that we think about really why owners ultimately, how they transition, why they want to transition out of their business.
Okay.
And I think you've hit upon a couple of them. One is, they've been doing it for 40 years and basically they're kind of ready for retirement. There's other reasons they may be looking for a new business opportunity, or they're just kind of burned out of the day-to-day operations. It could be that the company's been very successful, but it's kind of grown to a point where it's difficult for the original owner to manage it, and they need to do something else, bring in someone else who's got a different skill set. Could be that they're moving. And then there's a whole host of what we call kind of the deadly Ds, which are, one of the owners dies, or there's a divorce, or there's a disability or health issues, mm-hmm. or there's partners and there's a dissolution of that partnership where they've got debt issues, defaulting on debt or something of that nature. So there's lots of reasons why owners ultimately end up deciding to sell their business. But as I mentioned, every single business is going to turn over at some point. So what we call it is transition or exit planning. And that's something that's absolutely critical for a company, for an owner to do as early as possible. And we talk about, when's the best time to start planning for a transition out of your business? And the answer is the day that you started. And if you didn't do it then start now.
Okay.
And from my perspective, I kind of group that transition or exit planning into two general areas. One is personal for the owner themselves, and the second one has to do with the business itself. So from the owner's perspective, and just interrupt me if you've got questions at any point mm-hmm, here, but mm-hmm. I'll just keep going. But from the owner or the personal perspective, you really start out with why you're selling, right? Because when you get to the point where you're going to sell the business to somebody else, the number one question that any buyer is going to have is, why are you selling? So you've got to have a pretty buttoned up answer to that, and it's got to make sense. And so when I'm talking to owners about their exit planning or transition planning, I want to know, why are you selling? And then what I want to do is actually spend a little bit of time investigating alternatives to selling that might meet the owner's needs. For example, if you're just burnt out, well, that's because you're probably experiencing some problems in your business of some sort. can those be fixed? Does it make sense to perhaps bring in some outside advisors to get an external perspective on, what those issues are and can they be rectified? And maybe if you get those problems solved, hey, I don't want to sell the business right now. Hold on to it.
Mm-hmm.
You might say, hey, maybe we need to, maybe I'll get re-energized in this business if I added a new line of business. Might make sense to think about merging with a strategic partner, either a competitor or somebody in an aligned industry where it would make some sense, or maybe you don't want to partner with them, but you could set up some sort of a strategic alliance of sorts. Might make some sense to think about maybe you just need some external financing to really take the company where you want it to go. And that could be their debt, if the company can support it, or potentially outside equity. You may need to hire new management or additional staff to reduce the operating burden on the owner. Maybe it makes sense to acquire another business. Maybe it makes sense to recruit a board of advisors or a board of directors to kind of gain that outside knowledge and expertise from other industries that could help you. And if you've got heirs that are around, maybe you want to think about transitioning to the next generation. So there's lots of things to think about to really firm up whether selling is really the best alternative available to you. There could be other alternatives that make a lot more sense.
Didn't think about that. If you, that's interesting, right? So like, I don't have to sell my business. I could find somebody to manage it for me. I could find that I'm just bored with it because there's no challenge, but I'm not making enough. So maybe I take out a loan and I can grow it a little bit more and make it challenging again. Like you said, you could team up with somebody and form a partnership, and you take your two companies, put them together. Two heads can be better than one. So now you can grow exponentially because you have twice the power. Like you said, you could pass it down to your heirs, which I'm sure that's a whole other conversation for a lawyer on how that would all work.
Yep.
Those are all interesting insights from you, the professional, because once again, I'm just the small business guy trying to flounder my way through this all. So, how do you go about evaluating where somebody's at and really figuring that out? Like, is this like a 1 hour conversation with somebody? Is this like a half a day meeting? Is this over like a week as you review, years of taxes and P&Ls and, how do you even get through through that?
Yeah, I think the issues we were just talking about, which, why are you selling, and are there other alternatives that might meet your needs to alleviate your need to sell at the moment? I think that's the conversation. It's a couple hours basically sitting down and getting to know the owner, and a lot of it is really just as what just happened to you, right? You hadn't really necessarily thought of it in that context, and so when I sit down with business owners, that's one of the first things I talk about, and it creates in them some thinking process, right? And they may want to go away and, spend the next week thinking about it, talking to their spouse or their business partner or something, and then come back and have a more in-depth conversation about some of that stuff too. And, they may ultimately decide, yeah, okay, I thought about all this stuff, but I do want to sell, mm-hmm. right? And if that's the case, then I kind of press them to, okay, what I want owners to seriously consider what your life is going to be like the day after you sell the business. You've spent, could be 10 years, could be 40 years running this company. It's clearly completely integrated into your entire life. It's part of your identity, mm-hmm. And owners really need to think about that. Like, you meet somebody new at a party or something. What do you do? Oh, I own this flooring company. Well, you're not gonna be able to say that anymore. You can say, oh, I used to own a flooring company, but not anymore. And that's a big impact potentially. And I think someone's got to be prepared to really understand that they need to deal with that. And then, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do with your 40 hours a week that you were spending at your company, or in your case, as many times, probably 80 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
So you got to, what are you going to do? What are you going to do instead? How are you going to fill that time, and how are you going to get fulfillment in your life? That's an important thing to be thinking about way up front. You need to kind of understand that. And then the other critical thing is how much capital do you need to realize from the sale to meet your future financial needs? Whether it's retirement, or you want to go buy a new business, or you want to go traveling, or whatever. You need to have a pretty clear understanding of what your capital needs are. So those are some of the kind of owner personal issues that I like to get into with owners of businesses to make them really think about, is this the right course of action for you? Because it doesn't do them any good. It doesn't do me any good to get started, move on way down the road, and then ultimately have them decide, I guess I don't want to sell the business after all. And really I'm looking to try and help owners find the best solution for them. Mm-hmm. Well, once we've kind of talked about some of those personal, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, you bring up an interesting point. So one, you mentioned, you were like 40 hours a week, but probably 80. So entrepreneurs are the only weird people that say, I'd rather work 80 hours for myself than 40 hours for you. But then you were talking about, a lot of people, you might have 5, 10, 40 years into a company, and like, you can't go to that party anymore and say, I own this flooring business, or I own this plumbing business, whatever it is. It's your baby. Like you grew this thing from a pebble in your mind into whatever it's become today. And so would you sell your child? I don't know. I mean, exactly. I joked about it when my children were like first born, and people are like, oh, they're so cute. I was like, $1 million is all yours. I'm young. I can make more. But would I really let my kid go for $1 million? Probably not. He's unique. He's an individual, There's only one. So how do you how do you get people over that hurdle? Like, what are the answers you've heard of, like, when you've asked, what are you going to do tomorrow when this thing's no longer yours?
Right. Well, there's, two things, right? How do they get over the hurdle? I don't really push anybody to get over that hurdle. I think it's a very personal decision. They need to kind of get over that hurdle themselves. Mm-hmm. And, in terms of letting go of the baby, right? Like I said, if you've been doing it for a really, really long time and you're 65 years old and you go, you know what, I need to start planning for my retirement. I've got to do that. Time itself may force you into the decision to go ahead and sell the business and move on. Or there just could be a whole host of other factors that are kind of forcing your hand, or it could just be personal preference issues. Okay, I've done this. I'm comfortable now. I know that it's going to be a very different life, but I'm ready to embrace that and move on to the next chapter. And I feel like I've gotten everything out of this, owning this business that I want, and just kind of decide to move on at that point.
So a lot of tradespeople don't build large companies. There's obviously, there's always the outliers, and there are larger outfits that start from, just one guy owning a job. But a lot of tradespeople end up owning a job, essentially. They don't own a business. So they just keep themselves busy, right. Maybe them and an apprentice or a helper, maybe a second installer as that person advances. But there's not a lot of, they're there every day. That business functions because they're there. Can you sell that business? Or is that business really just valued at the tools and the van and the trailer that they sell at the end of their career?
Well, there's a number of issues that come into play in determining saleability of a business and how you ultimately determine value. I would say that, one of the big ones is what you just addressed, right? Do the assets, the true assets and the true value of the business, does it, leave the building and lock up and go home every night? If that's the case, that becomes a more difficult sale. It's not as potentially attractive to buyers as a company where there's a lot of infrastructure and assets and management team and multiple customers and all that sort of stuff. So again, it gets back to, planning early on. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong if someone makes a decision, you know what, I don't care about creating a business that has value. All I'm in this for is to earn a living while I'm doing this, while I'm able to be out there laying floors and being productive. And, I don't want the hassle of building a big, large organization that I have to manage and employees and all that sort of stuff. And that's perfectly fine. And understandable even. But, the flip side of that is then you're probably not creating an asset that can be sold to someone else. If it's a single owner operator business, there's a chance that you can get somebody. It's going to be another tradesperson probably, but you have to look at these things always from the perspective of the potential buyer, right? So what's the profile of a buyer that's going to be interested in that single operator type of business? It could be another, someone moving into the area from another location, right? Well, geez, I've been doing flooring in Southern California. Now I'm going to move to Arizona. Be easier if I just maybe buy a business that's already got some existing relationships in the area. So even there though, right? What are they buying? Well, they're buying potentially the existing relationship. Yeah, there's some equipment and all that sort of stuff as well, but they're buying theoretically some customer relationships. Maybe there's some other, vendor relationships, et cetera, that make it easy. So that owner operator should be maybe keeping records of, who they've done jobs for, keeping a list of relationships and all those sorts of stuff. And then probably they're going to need to stick around for a pretty decent transition period to make sure that all of those relationships transfer to the new buyer. But again, you're at the low end of the value spectrum if that's the type of business that you've created and want to sustain.
Okay, so if I have that model, right? I'm Pete's Flooring, and I'm Pete, and I go out, I do my projects, I have a few customers, I've been in business 5 years, I'm kind of over it, and like you said, somebody's moving in, but it's Pete's Flooring and their name's Frank.
Right.
And then I have an annual, I do $250K in revenue a year, and I'm able to pay myself $100,000 out of that. Okay. So after all cost of goods and all of that, I'm making a healthy 6 figures on my $250K revenue. What can I sell this business to Frank for, essentially?
Yeah. So as I said, there's a bunch of other factors that kind of come into play, but if you look at, generally speaking, it's a pretty broad range, but businesses like this are valued as a multiple of what we call seller's discretionary earnings.
Okay.
And without going into a whole ton of detail, that basically means the kind of operating profit of the business before taxes and before interest expense and all of that, and before the owner's compensation. And there's potentially some add backs if there's been truly one-time expenses and all that. We get into more detail on that later if you'd like. But
okay.
So businesses are sold, generally speaking, for a value that's a multiple of that seller's discretionary earnings. And the range, I would say, probably is in the flooring industry is probably a little below 1 times that number to 4, maybe 4.5 times that number. And where any specific business falls in that multiple range is a function of all of these different value determinants that we can go through. But one of them is, one of the big ones is what's the size of the business, and what's the management infrastructure that's in place that's going to be, what's the staff that's going to be staying on for the new buyer.
Well,
so
yeah,
if you've got
in this case, there's
Pete's
nothing.
Flooring that you talked about, and you talked about this Pete's Flooring, then you're going to be on the low end of that, and really even there, it's going to be, like I said, you're going to have to, first of all, I'd say don't call it Pete's Flooring. This is why it's so important to plan, early on, right? When you first get started, you begin with the end in mind. by calling it Pete's Flooring, you're automatically limiting the number of buyers because the best buyers may name Pete, but
Yeah.
you don't want to limit your buyers to that, right? So,
Well, and that was going to be my next question was if instead of it's Pete's Flooring, it's, Fabulous Flooring. Is the more generic usable name valued higher than something specific?
Yeah, it's very difficult to quantify, how much higher, but generally speaking, yes. I mean, it is because you've got, it's not tied to an individual. It's tied to a company. And then you go beyond that, it's has Pete, who owns Fabulous Flooring, how has he marketed the business, right? If you go to his website or if you go to Yelp Reviews or whatever, is everything totally focused on Pete personally, right? Or is it focused on the business, right? It's more transferable. Those assets, or if you call them that, they're soft assets, but that goodwill, so to speak, is more easily transferable to a buyer if it's not tied specifically to Pete and more to the company itself.
Interesting. So that's okay. So I personally have that problem because most of my reviews, they don't say illustrious hardwoods did blah, 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 blah. It's Kyle came out and he was awesome and they did blah, 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 blah. So I need to request that my clients use the company name and then they can put in that Kyle assisted with blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I would encourage you to do that. And then, I presume, I don't know what your situation is, but if you've got even one other employee, and have them mention the other employee. So at least you're getting, a couple of other people's names listed in those reviews.
Yeah.
A buyer coming in, they're going to, a buyer of a business is going to do very extensive, what we call due diligence on the operation. And you better believe that they're going to be going through all of the Yelp reviews and Google reviews and all that sort of stuff to give them insights onto the business. And that's one thing that they'd be looking at. Is it all completely tied to the owner, or is it, is there some institutional or corporate value here?
Yeah,
that is something that has value to a new owner.
Okay, so now we're working our way out of it being owner operator, and we're building this system that's in place, right? So now we have this corporate entity that you're talking about. So when you're talking about having a management team in place or like procedures and stuff, what am I needing to be able to show people that they can see that I'm not the business anymore and you can take this, whether it's a manual or whatever it is, that they can step in and like, you can do this. Like you can hop in and you can pick up right where I left off, essentially.
Well, that kind of goes back to the transition or exit planning. We talked a bit about, kind of the personal issues, and then now you're switching over to really the business or corporate, issues. And, to start off there, really, you need to be thinking about kind of what's the legal structure. Are you set up as an S Corp or a C Corp, an LLC, a partnership, a sole proprietorship? All of those things, could potentially have tax implications. And I'm not going to give any tax advice here, but those all could have, tax implications on the, when you ultimately sell the business and how much you're able to retain. Because that's the key number, right? Is after tax proceeds, not just what did I sell it for. And then are all of your corporate records, in order? That's what someone's going to need to look like. Then when you get into the management structure, which you were just talking about, right? And as we just discussed, is the business completely dependent on the owner, or is there a team in place that can manage in the owner's absence, right? I mean, can Pete go take a 2-week vacation and come back and everything ran smoothly, or he was getting interrupted on his vacation every 2 hours because people couldn't handle stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to be, when a buyer comes in and starts asking a bunch of questions, that's going to be relatively evident pretty quickly. But, you want to have to maximize value, to get to the higher end of that valuation range I talked about earlier. Ideally, you'd want to have a management team in place that can do it. It doesn't necessarily have to be all done at once. I mean, that's a process that can, take a year or 2 or 3 to kind of get fully implemented. But, I think if you're trying to build value of a company that you then have an asset that you can sell for some significant capital to ultimately fund your retirement or whatever else you want to do, this is a goal that you want to be moving towards. So you want to talk about some of the other kind of business characteristics as well that we would look at in the exit planning process?
Yeah, let's get into that, and then I might have other stuff as we go, but yeah, like what other things are we, walk us through this, because you're the expert. This is all 100% new to me. I've never really considered it, other than I always knew I needed to. If I was going to sell my business, I either needed something that I could hand over to my kids that just continued to operate with them, but they would be raised in the system so they could pick up on that. I would never just hand it to them. Or I needed something that could run without me. And that's all I kind of knew. So everything in between is brand new. So let's walk through what else is going on.
All right, so just kind of staying on the whole management and employee issue for a moment. So really, I think you want to be, as we talked about, see if the business can run sufficiently when the owner's off on a 2-week vacation or something. I think that's a really good test, right?
Yep.
And then are there any vacancies that need to be filled? Maybe you had somebody leave recently. You want to make sure that you have all those important positions within your company filled. Do you have capacity with your existing staffing to be able to handle growth, or is it the type of business where you can readily attain that? And maybe that's, as an interim step, maybe there's independent contractors that you're using to handle growth surges, and they potentially could bring them on full time if that growth is sustainable over time. And then a key question too is, you don't want to start asking your employees this and want to maintain confidentiality from the get-go on all these kind of discussions for the owner, but the owner should be able to have a pretty good handle on whether or not those employees would ultimately stay with the new owner, right? Are they working for the business, or are they just working for Pete? Are they just working for the one guy? And if Pete leaves, are they going to leave too? Because if that's the case, then that has a pretty negative impact on the valuation. And then moving on, you look at financial issues. So you absolutely, and this is important not just for selling the business, of course, but for day-to-day operations. Are your financial records current? Are they well maintained? Do you have a good system in place where you're capturing all the major financial metrics that you should be? Are sales and profits, are they trending up? Are they trending down? Are they flat? If they're going down or flat, you need to be thinking about, why is that, and what can we do to get it on a growth trajectory? Need to have an understanding what the growth opportunities are for the business. Sometimes, so many companies, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners, right? They're so busy working on the opportunities that are right in front of them. It's really hard to step back and plan some of these things. But I encourage owners to try and put in their schedule a day a month or something, a day every couple of months, where they put everything else aside and they just start thinking about the business itself and where is it going. And one of the key considerations there is what are the opportunities to really grow this business. And then, have a good understanding of what are the trends going on in the industry, and what are the industry considerations that need to be taken into account. Everybody is familiar with how digital downloads have completely wiped out the video rental business, right? But I don't think there's anything comparable in your industry. But you need to be thinking about those sorts of things. What's going on in the industry that I need to be each owner needs to be thinking about and incorporating into their business to kind of stay ahead of the curve there. Mm-hmm. If you've got inventory, is it overvalued or undervalued? Is your current level stable? Should it be normalized? Marketing and sales, are there channels that you're not necessarily using, but have the potential to be exploited for sales growth down the road? Again, are your sales 100% dependent upon the owner, or are you able to bring sales in otherwise? are your taxes taken care of? Both your income tax returns, are they filed on time? Are they consistent with your internal financial records? Are you current with your sales taxes and your property taxes and that sort of thing? You want to be looking at your facilities. Do you own or lease? If you lease it, what's the status of your lease? If it expires in 6 months, that's going to be a red flag for, if the lease is important to the operations of your business, that's going to be a red flag for a potential buyer. So you need to kind of have that figured out. And really, if you've got facilities, and the same goes for your equipment, right? Or are they clean? Are they well maintained? Are the repairs needed? Are you taking care of that? A buyer is going to be looking at those sorts of things, and they're going to be assessing the value of the business based upon how well you maintain your facilities and your equipment. Is your equipment too old? You really should have new equipment in place. You want to take care of those things ahead of time. What about technology? Are you keeping up with the latest? Are you using a CRM or not? Are there other technology advancements that's going on in the industry itself that you need to be taken into consideration as well? So those are some of the business characteristics that need to be delved into and thought about when you're putting your transition or exit plan in place.
I think you just blew a bunch of people's minds. I'm sitting here like, the problem with me doing these things is that I start, I hear what you say, and I it's not that I'm not focused, but the wheels start turning in my own head as I do some of these interviews, and I'm like, oh man, okay, I got to think about this and this, and I start thinking about it, and I'm all like, oh wait, hold on, I'm doing an interview. So I think, like you said, you need to set aside an hour a week, a day a month to think about your business and work on your business, because a lot of us we are the owner operator, and we're stuck working in the business, doing the actual work. And it's hard to get outside of that without putting in 12, 16-hour days every day to grow it. And so, and I know you get that because you've grown 2 businesses and sold them, and you were doing investment stuff, and I'm sure those aren't short days. So I know the long day, but it can wear on you after a while. You start doing something 7 days a week, and you don't get that vacation or that down day, and then you're worn out. And you don't want to do anything, and so it's easy to lose motivation. And so I think setting up that you got to set up boundaries and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, but I think really if you decide that it's important and make it a priority, you can schedule it into your time. So there's going to be, potentially lost revenue for you for that day, a month that you're going to take to set this aside. But if you value it in the context of, but this, spending time developing an exit plan, developing my business, that's going to create, potentially a huge amount of value when I ultimately do decide to sell the business. Then it kind of helps you prioritize it a little bit more, and you go, okay, well, I'm not going to be too worried about, losing that one piece of business. But, if you put it on your calendar, okay, 2 months from now, I don't know how far booked out you are, but I would imagine that there might be an open day at sometime in the next 2 months, right? And if you just block that one day off, or one of your listeners just block one day off that's open, a couple months from now, and say that day I'm not going to book any jobs that day. I'm not going to be even booked being in the office. I'm going to book that day. 100% of that is I'm going to sit down and go through some planning issues for my overall business to try and create real value here down the road. Well, and then you can do it. So it's a mental exercise, I think, really of deciding, is this important or not, and then prioritizing it.
Yeah, and I don't think you're ever going to lose revenue doing that. You lose revenue that day, but what you're building will multiply your revenue. So you get it on the back end, and not even necessarily through the sale. You could build a better marketing campaign so that instead of being busy 2 weeks a year or 2 weeks a month, you're now busy 3.5 weeks a month because you spent a day working on better marketing. So
exactly,
now you have more revenue, which means you have more income. So it never hurts to step back, look at the big picture, and invest that time in it. I feel personally that I've come very far in the 3 years I've been on my own, and I feel I get busier every year. I feel the numbers show I'm doing more revenue. I got to make sure this year that that's happening, but we can always chalk that up to COVID and just call this year like a wash. I'll throw that card out there and just I'll use it. Why not? I think I'm on track though to beat I do. I think I'm on track to beat last year, but it's going to be a hectic last fourth quarter. That's for sure.
Yeah, good for you. But I think, fortunately, I think a lot of people in the trades are experiencing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's people are, so many people have been working from home, right? They're stuck in their house and they're going,
so
geez,
their homes.
I didn't notice I needed to take care of this, or
Yep.
Now that I'm home, I can actually deal with the contractor coming in. So I'm gonna go ahead and take care of this stuff now. And so I think most of the people in trades that I'm talking to have all had pretty good years through this, or a pretty good year through this COVID thing.
It slowed down for a minute when it first hit, and it depends on what state you're in.
Right.
I saw stuff from guys who were busy the whole way through to the states that were, New York was 100% shut down. You couldn't do a thing. So those guys, obviously they have a different year. Phoenix was a little more lenient, and that's okay. But even still, It doesn't matter how busy you are. Find the time to step back, look at the big picture, find your holes, and don't plug them, right? Like, let's not put some duct tape over the hole in the ship. Let's patch it properly so that we can continue to float on without that stress anymore. So let's go down that. Okay. So what kind of things are we looking for that instead of plugging it and it's going to fail, like, we can patch it? So what kind of things have you noticed in businesses for sale where like the fix is kind of, instead of spending 10 minutes on it, if they would spend an hour on it, they'd be good for the next year instead of the next month?
Yeah, I think we've talked about some of those issues already, but it goes back to, again, I think each individual owner has to sit down and do a critical assessment of what their business is. And, I don't know if you've heard of a SWOT analysis, but it's SWOT. It basically stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And it's a strategic planning tool that a lot of companies use, and you just got to sit down and go through figuring out what strengths do we have in my business right now? What are the true strengths? And it might be, man, we've got a great reputation in the marketplace. We've got huge attention to detail, and that's reflected in all of our reviews, et cetera. Or we've got a specific way of installing that a lot of our competitors aren't using, and because we've developed specific expertise in doing that, et cetera. But then move on to, well, what are the weaknesses that we have? And some of those weaknesses may be some of the things we've talked about. Well, we don't have a staff large enough to really allow for the owner to take a week off vacation, and it's entirely dependent upon him. Or, boy, we're not able to grow our revenues the way we'd like to. We're just not well known enough out in the marketplace. Then you look at opportunities, and that's kind of self-evident. What are the opportunities for growth or to improve the business? And then what are the threats? I mean, this might be exogenous, external threats that are coming from the industry, or there may be a new competitor in town that's coming in. Maybe some large national franchise or something has decided to focus in on your market, and they're going to be coming in and trying to grab market share and cutting prices and all that sort of stuff. So it's really doing a pretty thorough analysis of what is the strategic view of your business, on those metrics. And then what's going to come out of that process really is, well, how do we address some of those issues? How do we address the threats? How do we address the weaknesses that we've got? And I'll tell you, I think it's a challenge. I think because most business owners, certainly in the trades, but in other businesses as well, right? I mean, there's so many businesses out there where the owner has specific training and specific expertise in that market segment that they're working in. You know, you've got specific expertise. You know how to do flooring. I mean, you're the expert there, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you or, you know, somebody may be a great chiropractor. They understand that, right? But it doesn't mean that those people have ever really had any specific training in how do you operate a business, because it's kind of a different skill set to some extent, or it is a different skill set.
Yes, 100%. Two
and
completely different
and
things.
you can not that one person can't have both, but it's not uncommon at all for that industry specialist, that operating specialist, to not have that business running expertise, right? So, you know, I just encourage owners to, be a lifelong learner and just challenge yourself. You know, you have to think of yourself not just as a flooring installer. You need to start thinking of yourself as a business owner. So what skill sets and what additional information or education do you need to give yourself to be a good business owner?
Well, they're already listening to this, so they're on the right track.
Yeah, they're on the right track. And so, I mean, you know, you can say, well, you know, like I said earlier, one of the key things is you need to have high quality and well-maintained financial records, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to be an accountant, but you need to have a decent understanding of what profit and loss is and what a balance sheet should be and all that. And then you know enough that, hey, I want to hire a really high quality bookkeeper. I want to hire potentially an accounting firm to, help make sure that I'm doing everything that I need to be doing here to, have a business that can ultimately be sold, but B, even more importantly, have business financial metrics that I can watch and help me manage my business better. Right. Exactly. One of the things that determines value in anybody's business and that buyers will look at is kind of what a specific company's performance is relative to industry norms, right? They'll look at what's a normal profit margin, just to pick a really easy one or a normal one, right? What's the norm? What should companies in this industry be earning on a profitability basis? What should the profit margins be, both gross profits and operating profits? Okay. And what are the other key performance indicators, right? So every owner, when you start thinking about those sorts of things, well, you need to have an understanding of what those are. You need to kind of do some research to figure out, well, what are the norms in the industry, and how am I, and be able to monitor how you're performing against those metrics. You need to have data, right? So you got to get the data, right? You got to make sure that you're capturing the data and recording it and maintaining it and those sorts of things. So
well, that's my question. So where do you go to get that data? Because I've kind of looked for like what average flooring retailers are doing in my area. Like, I don't even know how to Google and find that info. Is that readily available somewhere? Do I have to go to my competitors and just straight up ask them? Like, where do I find this data where like average profit margins are for retailers or independent flooring installer contractors like myself, and what their annual revenue is? And like, where is that information stored?
So there's a number of places, and I can't answer specifically for your industry because I just haven't looked into it at this point. But okay. My guess is that you've got some industry association. That's the first place I would go. Most industry groups try to gather information from their members and then compile that data and then share it on a no names basis with, on a confidential basis back to the industry so that they can see. There's a number of databases in our industry where you're out looking for companies where you can see there's valuation data services that have some industry metrics for different industries. Okay. You can just Google flooring installer industry KPIs, right? And see what comes up. KPI for key performance indicators.
Okay.
and see what comes up. But I'm sure that data is out there.
Oh, me too.
But it can be challenging to find it at some point. But I'd start with the industry groups, industry trade association.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so there are those. My business model is an outlier, and there isn't a specific trade industry for what I do. There's, there's other trade industries, and you can kind of figure out what those installers are doing, but that's a different niche, and so those numbers don't necessarily represent me, and that's the problem.
Right.
It's like I'm kind of in a different area, but those numbers probably exist. I just have to find them. But then once we find those numbers, we're not comparing to feel bad about ourselves. We're comparing so we can improve ourselves or know that we are at the top of our market.
Exactly. I mean, even if you are at the top of the market, theoretically, you're going to keep trying improving, right? You're further ahead of the market.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's important to kind of understand, and it's just, again, it helps you manage your business, and that's just one of the ideas where I just encourage owners to keep learning, right? I mean, there's some great business books out there. I'm sure you probably read some, right? But there's just basic business strategy books that I would encourage people to read, and it'll address some of the topics that we've talked about. But you can look up those. There's a book, a whole book series called Traction, by a guy by the name of Gino Wickman.
Okay.
And there's a whole industry that's popped up out of that where they call it the entrepreneurial operating system, and they've got implementers all over the place, and they come in as outside consultants to help businesses. I mean, they're probably not relevant for necessarily a single owner operator size business. That's more for bigger companies, but nonetheless, the concepts that you can pick up just by picking up a copy of the book and reading it,
mm-hmm.
are, potentially highly relevant to even that owner operator, to kind of give them a vision of where do they want to go. I mean, you got to have a vision. You got to just, where do I want to take my business over time? How do I get there?
Well, and that just, we can full circle it, and you have to start with the end in the beginning. Like you got to start with the end in mind, right? So if you don't have the vision, you're just waking up every day to punch a clock to go install a floor, and you're just trying to find one floor after another, but it doesn't really matter how you get it. So
right.
Frank's flooring isn't necessarily going to go far.
Right. And there's a terrific motivation to develop that vision, right? Because instead of, if you can put some of these things that we talked about, if you can get all those implemented, and you can develop this organization that's not dependent upon you as the owner, you've got, you got people that are working for you that are bringing in the business and doing the actual work itself. You've got depth of a management team. You've developed certain competitive advantages over the years, all of those sorts of things, right? Well, guess what? That's an asset that you can sell for a multiple of your annual earnings.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You may be able to get 3-4 times that in one lump sum. So that can be a pretty big number. And not to mention that you're probably, if you start focusing in on some of these issues early on, you're probably going to end up having a larger company that's more profitable than if you didn't.
Yeah. Well, because you're going to manage better, right? You're going to have systems and processes in place. You're going to know how to deal with issues when they arise. You're going to know who's in charge of that problem, because you probably have more than just you to handle it. So everybody has a role, and they can all handle their role. They all know who to go to tell, like, hey man, this is messed up over here. Can you take care of this? They come back to you. You take care of your things. The clients are getting taken care of. The store's getting taken care of. The installations are being done properly. Everything's scheduled. So there's a machine churning behind it, instead of one guy like myself now and many others that listen to the show running around like a chicken with their head cut off. And even though the business is profitable and earning money and you're trying to build something, the early years are very tough because you keep trying to get over that next hurdle, and you're trying to get to this next thing to make it that one step easier. but all you're doing is creating yourself a different hurdle to jump over. It's kind of, entrepreneurs are the craziest people on the planet, I swear.
Right. But, you know, I mean, I guess you can take comfort in the fact that that's the way everybody's got to start off. I mean, anybody in your trade, right? That's how they start out, right? But I'm sure you and your listeners can all think of the one or two or multiple players in your industry that have kind of gotten through that, right? And they're well on the other side of that. And they've got a big, large, successful company that is, you know, running very efficiently. And, you know, so you look at that and, hey, why can't you get there too? Why can't you do it? You just gotta, you gotta get out of the day to day to make that happen. You got to keep doing the day to day. That's the issue, right? You got to keep doing the day to day, but you got to get out of it as well, so that you can kind of put some planning in place, and then start setting up goals and specific things that you're going to try and achieve within a specific time frame, et cetera, and then get after it.
Well, and you know, like you said, you got to do the day to day, but you got to put in the work after hours. You got to do that day a month, or that day every other month, or that couple hours a week, or the hour twice a week after a 16-hour day. You got to do whatever you got to do to grow it and get it there.
Right.
All right. Let's, is there like an average buyer out there? Do you find that, I don't know how many like trades related businesses you've dealt with, but when you're looking at something kind of specific like that, do you find that it's more often another tradesperson moving, like you had kind of mentioned earlier, coming in, or is it more investors just kind of looking to pick something else up that can be an asset for them and run itself and generate money? Or is it a pretty healthy mix and you never know who's looking to buy it?
Well, you can make general cuts, right? I mean, the smaller owner operator, you know, one to three, 1 to 5 employees type of situation. The buyer of that is most likely going to be another tradesperson that can come in and fill the shoes of the owner who's exiting. Mm-hmm. And so they most likely they either have to be already skilled in that specific trade, or they've got to have enough capability to be able to pick it up pretty quickly with the exiting owner providing some training over a short period of time, 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. But generally speaking, that's going to be an individual buyer. It could also be, one of your competitors, perhaps. It starts getting a little tricky when you want to approach them. But that often happens. Sometimes that just happens kind of naturally. You've got a relationship with one of your competitors, and it's turned to be pretty friendly. And he just says, "Hey, well, you just say, man, I'm getting burnt out on this business," and he says, "Well, hey, why don't you let me? I'll buy it from you." Maybe something like that develops. Mm-hmm. When you get into the larger company, you still have individual buyers that make sense, but you may also then have larger corporate strategic buyers that could either be in the exact same industry, or they could be potentially in a related industry where someone's interested in doing getting some horizontal integration going on, where they've got I'm sure you can think of it better than I, but where there's some other trade that they're really strong in, but man, they're seeing a lot of opportunities to do flooring installation. And if they just own the flooring installation, they could capture all that business instead of referring it out to somebody else. Yeah. So it could be, that's kind of a horizontal integration thing. Okay. You got vertical integrators as well. I mean, I'm not sure how much of that's being done in the flooring industry at the moment, but if somebody's a supplier may decide, hey, I want to have my own installation capability as well as providing the product to all the installers. And then, when you get into the much larger companies, then theoretically you're also talking about potential, what we call financial buyers, which are basically private equity funds and those sorts of things, where they're interested in making an investment. They're not interested in handling the day-to-day operations or management of the business, but they're looking for a financial return. And that for those companies, you're really looking at, or for those buyers, you really have to be a company that is generating a couple $1 million or $1.5 million, not of revenues, but of earnings to get their interest.
Okay. All good info. Are you only handling sales in Phoenix, or do you said it was your company was part of a nationwide franchise. So are you handling stuff nationwide, or do you only deal with the businesses here?
So the business brokerage industry is a little interesting in that it's regulated in 17 states, including Arizona, by the real estate Department of Real Estate. You have a real estate license, and so if there's a state where a business broker does not have to be licensed as a business broker, theoretically, I could get involved and help. I'm not sure that's going to make the most sense because there's just so much process involved in selling a business. I mean, I think it's very helpful to have your business broker close to you so that they can really work with you on a day-to-day basis. It's a pretty involved and pretty intense process for a short period of time, theoretically intense while it's happening.
Okay.
But we've got offices all over the place, so it's very easy for me to put if one of your listeners is interested in pursuing it, I'd be happy to put them in touch with a Sunbelt office and whatever location they're at.
Okay. And then you're also doing consulting, right?
Well, I'm not formally at this point,
Okay.
but I'm happy to jump on a call and help somebody out with some stuff and maybe give them some ideas of where to go to get more formalized consulting.
Okay. Are you willing to throw your number out there or an email address?
Oh, of course.
Okay. So
Yep.
let's do that.
So my email.
Go ahead.
My email address is ansel.hall@sunbeltnetwork.com.
Okay.
And my phone number is 480-382-9850.
Awesome. And so if they have questions, call you up, you can kind of get them pointed in the right direction and help them for their area potentially and let them know, hey, that's regulated, not regulated. If you have an office there, you can help them out.
Yep.
If they are thinking they want to sell, you can kind of point them in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'm also a member of the International Business Brokers Association and M&A Source, which is a couple national trade associations. And so even if there isn't a Sunbelt office in their location, I can very easily find someone who's kind of a member of IBBA and put them in touch with somebody there.
Okay. And okay, the book's name was Traction. There's like a series of books under that?
Yes.
Okay. You got
it. The author's Gino Wickman, and that's just one example. I mean, I'm happy to plug it because I think it's a great overview of kind of business management, business strategy, et cetera. But if somebody just does a little bit of quick research on business strategy and et cetera, there's a lot of resources out there.
I was going to add, do you have like another one or two off the top of your head that you really thoroughly enjoyed?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, that's one that I read recently. Let me just look up. There's Good to Great. I don't know if you've heard of that or not.
That was this month's. We recorded this in September, so it's going to come out a little later. But yeah. September's book of the month for the Floored-U-Cation book club was Good to Great. So we did that.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go.
So then we can do you got to do the one that was written before it, but is technically the one that comes after it, which is, I can't, it's Good to Great. And then it's like Great Companies, or I forget, he mentions it like 100 times in the book and I can't think of the name. But
I can't think of it either.
It's all about remaining great though. Like how you got to get there and then it's how to remain there. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Sounds familiar.
Awesome. I appreciate the basic insights. I know that there's so much more to this and we only scratched the surface, but sometimes that's all we can do in an hour. And, you know, for somebody seriously considering it, this can at least get them pointed in the right direction to get more info. And for somebody that is brand new to business, you've got a plan for the end no matter what. Just start now.
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't own a flooring business. It's been said 100 times on this show probably, and Ansel has said it again. You're not a flooring installer anymore. You are a business owner. You now own a business. You are a salesperson. You are a marketing person. You are 100 other positions. Yes, you have to install the floor. You have 99 other responsibilities now as well, and you need to work on those.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't really have a business. You just have a job.
Right.
So
I would just reiterate as well that you've got every incentive to do it. You're putting the time and energy and the effort into it anyway. So why not build something that has value to transfer to a new owner down the road somewhere?
Man, I'm with you. It's too much work to not have it be worth something, in my opinion. It really is.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Ansel, thank you so much for your time and spending it with me in the evening. I truly appreciate it. Thank you for your insights and being willing to give them out there to the listeners for free.
Absolutely.
I would love to. I'm sure we can find something else to visit again down the road. So we'll have to see what we can set up. And then you're in my area here in Phoenix, so we should get together and have a drink or something at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Just let me know when. Love to do it.
Awesome.
No, happy to be on. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with your listeners. And I think you're doing good work here. I think you're doing a good thing with this podcast. So
you did the hard work, my friend. You did the hard work. Oh no, but thank you. I appreciate it. So I will let you go for the evening, and we'll try and get together.
All right, super.
All right, bye.
Talk to you soon.
Yep.
Thanks. Bye.
That's all the time we have for this week. To keep the conversation going, head on over to the Floor Academy Facebook group. Be sure to subscribe so you can hear each and every episode. We can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and most major podcast directories. Don't forget to leave a review and let us know what you think about the show. If you would like to be a guest, have questions or feedback, you can email us at flooracademypodcast@gmail.com. You can help support the show by becoming a patron over at www.patreon.com/flooracademy. Remember to learn while you earn.